If you guys don't remember from the last meeting, my name is Stephen Ray. I'm the Assistant City Manager here for the City of Friendswood. Happy to be here again for the second meeting for the Citizens Advisory Team. I'd like to thank all the folks that were here for the first meeting, those that came back for this meeting, and any new faces. Tonight, we're going to run through two presentations. One with kind of the impetus on the financial health of the city, what kind of debt we could possibly incur with the bond election, and what that impact would be to our budget. And then two, our capital improvements plans, which kind of is going to go through our city facilities, our parks, our streets, and some other items, just to kind of give you guys a heads up on what, as a staff, we've looked at and identified as possible areas of interest for us. We've got some familiar faces with Katina Hampton here, the Director of Administrative Services, Renee Ibarra, the Interim Director of Public Works, and James Toney, Director of Parks and Recreation. Everybody's going to be helping out. So without prolonging it, we'll have Katina come up and begin her presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, I am Katina Hampton. I'm the Director of Administrative Services. Accounting and finance are areas in my division. So I am here to give you some information on, as Stephen said, the financial health of the city, and just some other financial data that might be useful to the process. As mentioned in our first meeting, the city's current credit rating issued by Standard & Poor's was AA-. That was with the last bond issuance in December of 2018. The last time that the group, or the last time we had a group and we had a bond election, the voters approved a $24 million bond election. That was in November of 2013. We did not issue that all at one time. We issued that in a series of 3 bond issuances. In 2015, we issued 9.6 million. 2016, another 8.8 million. And in 2017, we issued that final round of those bonds for 5.6 million. The city's current general obligation debt in total is around 41.1 million. That is a little bit less than that because we have made some debt service payments during this fiscal year. Back to mentioning the city's credit rating. The last time the city's credit rating was increased was in 2009. We went from an A+ rating to the AA- rating, and that was issued by Standard & Poor's. The city's adopted budget for fiscal year 2019, we had revenues of 58.6 million and expenditures of 58.3 million. We had a net taxable property value of around 3.4 billion, and our tax rate that was adopted for this 2018 tax year was 53.24 cents per $100 valuation. Our tax rate is divided into a maintenance and operations, or what is used for general operations of the city, and that rate is 43.72 cents, and our debt service rate, which goes toward, it raises taxes to pay debt service obligations, our principal and interest payments, and that rate is 9.5 cents, a little over 9.5 cents. Of that $58.6 million in revenue that's included in our adopted budget for this year, 19.6 million of that is restricted revenue, meaning that it can only be used for the purposes that it's raised. And this is a listing of some of the things that our revenues in our adopted budget are restricted for. It's for debt service payments, those principal and interest payments on prior bond issuances. We have sales tax that was adopted in 2016 for street improvements and the Friendswood downtown economic development. So those are some of the things that we have restricted uses or restricted revenue uses. Wanted to touch on the effective tax rate because this comes up every year as we're going through our budget, as we go through the city's multi-year financial plan. The city has adopted in the last 6 years, I think in the last 3 of the last 6 years, we've adopted the effective tax rate or just a little over the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate, defined by definition, it's the tax rate that needs to be set to garner or levy the same amount of revenue on properties that are taxed in the current fiscal year or the current tax year and the prior tax year. And there is an inverse relationship between property tax values and the effective tax rate. As property values go up, the effective tax rate goes down. And the same is true if property values go down, that effective tax rate would go up in order to levy that same amount of revenue on those properties, provided that the value of that property didn't change from one year to the next. The city offers several exemptions to homeowners. We have the 20% homestead exemption, which is the largest amount that a city can allow for their residents to claim against their properties. Very few cities have the 20% homestead exemption, so we are very fortunate here to be able to offer that to residents and still be able to garner enough property tax revenue to cover our operations as well as debt service obligations. We also offer a over 65 exemption for residents who've reached 65 years of age or older. We also have freeze ceilings for those residents. We also offer disabled persons exemptions of $25,000, and we also have disabled veterans and surviving spouses of disabled veterans. Our exemptions for this tax year totaled around $743 million. So we have exempted that much of our overall taxable or overall appraised value here in the city. And again, we're very fortunate that our previous councils and our current council has decided to continue offering those exemptions to our residents. We're very fortunate here in Friendswood because other cities do not offer that. Wanted to share with the group the city's legal debt margin. This, by definition, is the difference between the maximum debt service requirement on principal and interest. This is the most that the city could have in outstanding debt service obligations and what our current maximum debt service payment is. So the city could levy a tax rate to cover debt service payments of $1.50. And as we showed you on a previous slide, our current debt service rate is only 9.5 cents. So we are well below that maximum debt service rate. We could also, that would equate to about $44.7 million in debt service payments. And as mentioned on a previous slide, our current debt service obligation for general obligation bonds is around $3.2 million for this year. So we're not suggesting that we go anywhere near that high in issuing bonds. It would be a heavy tax burden to do something like that, but we would be within the legal debt margin to do so. It has been mentioned, and we always look at, or it's been mentioned about a pay-as-you-go theory. We talked about that in the last meeting, and just wanted to give a definition of what that would mean. It's using current revenue or using cash to fund operating and capital expenditures. Wanted to show some of the pros and cons. This is not an exhaustive list, but just some that we wanted to point out to the group that with a pay-as-you-go theory or method, it limits or it would provide limited or no additional debt service obligations, and it would lessen future tax burdens. The cons, if you'll call it that, is that there's no generational equity. If we were to pay as you go for a $20 million project and we paid cash for that today, that infrastructure, that capital improvement would probably have a useful life of 20, 30, 40 years, and we would pay for it today, and those generations 20 years from now that would still benefit from that equipment, that infrastructure, would not pay anything toward that purchase. So another Another con or a downside to it is front-end taxing or revenue generation, because we would have to either levy taxes or generate revenue upfront to be able to pay for those projects that we would be looking to build or pay for. In doing that, in order to have revenue, that amount of revenue available, the only way we would be able to do that would be to reduce or limit the services that are being provided to our residents currently. And that could, like I said, be looked at. Some may look at it as a pro, some would probably look at that as a con. And then project funding limitations. If we're only using the revenue that we're able to garner, then we're not going to be able to do as many projects or in a timely manner to get as many of those done as we would maybe like to see. This slide and the information, the data that's provided here came to us. Do we want to take questions? Okay. We'll answer questions as we finish up. This information was actually provided by the city's financial advisors. We wanted to see what amount of possible debt we could issue with no impact to the tax rate versus up to 5 cents on our tax rate. And as you can see, we could possibly levy $10 million in bonds or issue $10 million in bonds with no impact to the city's current tax rate. Or we could issue bonds up to $45 million with only a 5 cent increase to our tax rate. We did want to mention here that we did take a conservative approach on the assessed growth value, because we looked at what our property values are and what the growth could be to support future debt service or future debt issuances. And so we looked at 1 to 1.5% growth on our property valuations. And keep in mind, on previous slide, we showed that our current taxable value is $3.4 billion. This last slide that I'll show you dealing with the financial impact is what that previous slide's data would do to the average tax bill or to a tax bill. Looking at a home with a value of $300,000, everything remaining constant over the next few years, $300,000 home using the 20% homestead exemption would yield a taxable value of around $240,000 that we would tax on. And if you can see, that first and second column shows the no increase. Current tax bill on that house would be around $1,278. No increase would mean that tax bill would stay the same. At 5 cents, which would be the maximum, that was the maximum amount shown on the previous slide, the tax bill would go up, annual tax bill about $120. So we're looking at about $10 a month on a $300,000 home that could support a bond issuance of around $45 million. If we want to take questions. Are there any questions before we move on, or you want to go back and look at any of the slides? Do you want to field the question? Okay.
Yes, sir.
The city factored in like Friendswood Country Club and all these new neighborhoods that bring in 300 plus homes into this $45 million, 5 cents per household. You're adding 400 plus houses in the next year. I mean, is this number based on today or?
The information provided on the slide was based on today. So as
Sure. And the question was asked if we factored in, for example, the Friendswood Trails project that's bringing in 400 new homes. The short answer to that question is yes, it was factored in our annual growth rate of that 1 to 1.5%. Those 400 homes aren't going to be completed for about a 10 or 15-year period. The first number of homes that are going to be on the ground within the next year are about 100 to a little 125. But we do count that in the assessed value growth.
Absolutely. When we spoke, we talked about total outstanding debt. That included not only general obligation, which is tax-supported debt, but also revenue debt service, which is supported by water and sewer utilities. So that's the difference, and the total is around 82.2 million in total.
So the question was asked whether or not the city had a plan in place to pay off the debt. In short, yes, we do. We have debt service plans to pay these debts as we're obligated to when we incur them. We have a debt curve associated with our annual payments and plus limitations on when and how quickly that debt can be paid off. The purpose of this group is to evaluate all the city's needs. If you come back and say there's no need to issue any further debt and that you would rather work on a plan to pay it all off, then that's perfectly okay. The purpose of this group is to formulate a plan to ultimately present before the voters of this city to see if they're willing to support the debt, much like they did in 2013. As you saw on the previous slides, our debt burden is relatively low for a city of our size. Our debt service in comparison to our overall tax rate is a little under 20%. If you look at all of our neighboring cities, they border 50% or more of their overall tax burden. So we talked about a few slides back as a pay-as-you-go theory. If that's a choice that this committee decides that they would like to pursue, then by all means we can evaluate that. But in order to achieve that, we would have to increase the tax rate sufficiently to be able to garner those funds to pay that project today. So, well, y'all can visit as a group ultimately and decide what y'all want to do. But I understand. Yes, sir.
And I would add, in addition to what Murad said, at any time there is an opportunity to refund or refinance outstanding debt to lower the interest rate and lower the remaining balance that's there, we take those opportunities when they're available to us.
Before, yes, sir.
I remember in 13, the $24 million debt was, there would be an anticipated 5-cent tax increase. Did that happen?
The question was that you remember from the 2013 bond advisory group that there was an impact of about 5 cents estimated for the 24 million. The answer to that question was no. We experienced growth at a far greater clip than what we had projected. And as Katina alluded to in previous slides, we were able to do that a number of years by adopting the effective tax rate with the exception of, I believe, 1 year.
And so
Yes.
right now, the 5 cents that we can project, we can get almost double what we could have gotten 5 years ago.
The question was, right now the projection says that we can get almost double than what we projected 5 years ago, and that's due in large part to the growth in values, the growth in new revenues between sales tax and other streams to be able to fund those payments.
And I know, just as a point for the people that weren't here in the 2013, I helped out a lot on the finance part of it, and one of the things that we did was we looked at all the different sources of revenue, and so we said nothing's off the table. So we looked at, do we want to mess with the 20% homestead exemption? At the time we weren't capped at sales tax. Do we want to go after the sales tax? So we looked at all those different ones, and so I think that's part of what we're being tasked with again, and there'll be a finance portion of it to say, what are those other sources of revenue? Is it just bonds, or do we have other avenues that we can go down? So, and that's all the finance group did, is look at different options that we could do.
If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the capital projects component.
Excuse me. portion of the presentation. We're going to cover three main categories here this evening. One was city facilities, our city streets, and then our parks. And so I'll turn it over to Renee here to run through our facilities, and then Mr. Tony to run through the parks.
Good evening, all. And as Stephen said, I'm going to go through the facilities portion. Again, as reiterated earlier, these are just projects that are presented as the committee gets together and you start regrouping. There might be other direction. The information we're going to give you is more of a bird's eye view, kind of above, and then as we get it honed in on which projects you want to move on towards, we'll get you the more refined details to each one. So for the CIP beyond 5 years, we have the Public Safety Building Phase 2. The second one, Public Works and Parks Building Renovation. The third one, the Volunteer Fire Department Training Field Upgrades. And the next one, Fire Station number 2 reconstruction. And the last one being Activity Center. The first one, Public Safety Building Phase 2. It's a current facility that was completed in 2007. It's approximately 28,000 square feet, and it's proposed to be expanded to 19,000 square foot. The expansion would encompass the police and the fire marshal office space, the court area, and the records retention area. It's also proposed to increase the parking spaces to 35 new parking spaces. It's estimated cost at $5 million. The next one being the Public Works and Parks facility. Unfortunately, due to Hurricane Harvey, the Deepwood, our facility was located at 1306 Deepwood, was flooded, inundated, and distorted by Hurricane Harvey. We've been temporarily housed at different satellite offices, but currently at the Blackhawk facility, Old Food Line. What's kept us out of being able to rebuild at Deepwood are the floodplain regulations in place and prohibit reconstruction in the same location, primarily due to the floodway. The goal is to renovate the facility to serve the Public Works and Parks Department, and it's also noted as being an emergency shelter in place at the facility as well. The estimated cost is $6.3 million to $7 million, and we're also working into seeking grant funds to offset the purchase and the renovation cost. The next one is being the Activity Center. The Activity Center currently houses the Senior Center and is designated also as an emergency shelter. That one was a great facility to use during Hurricane Harvey, and it came to a great resource for the city of Friendswood. It's rehabilitation in addition to the existing facility, and it's also a component of the Parks Master Plan identified to increase the recreation space. Its estimated cost is $7.8 million to $8.7 million. Next on the list is our Fire Station number 2 reconstruction. It's over on the far reaches of 528. It was originally constructed in 1981, and it's had a few updates in 1983 and 2004. It's proposed to expand or be in place as 6,650 square foot facility similar to the Fire Station number 4. And our estimated cost on that facility is roughly $1.8 million to $2.1 million. Next on the list is also in the rear of that facility currently is the Volunteer Fire Department Training Field Upgrades. Is to construct a fire evolution training structure to suit the needs of our updated needs of our firemen. It allows the Volunteer Fire Department to train on site, and the estimated cost for that one is $1.2 million to $1.5 million. On our streets, we have on the ongoing CIP currently, we have the currently at work is the Blackhawk Boulevard Phase 2, and then we're also within the Pavement Management Master Plan. For the beyond 5 years, and in telling the projects we're putting on the plate or suggesting, is the Blackhawk Boulevard Phase 3, Friendswood Parkway, and the Whispering Pines Friendswood Link bridge elevation. Did want to note here at the bottom, the note is we have the ongoing street maintenance and repair of $1.5 million to $2 million per year from our street maintenance sales tax that was recently approved. So for our Black Hawk Boulevard Phase 3, it's the reconstruction of Black Hawk Boulevard, and it's for the two pieces on each end, the first one being the Edenville to FM 251, and then the other piece being Thursa Lane to 528. It's to continue the current construction of Phase 2 to replace the deteriorating roadway, to improve the storm sewer and also the utilities in that area. The estimated cost is $5.5 million to $6.1 million. Next on the list is Friendswood Parkway from FM 528 to 251. It's proposed extension from Lake City Parkway to FM 528, currently in the design phase with Galveston County. It's the portion we're speaking of is 1.87 miles in length, and an estimated cost of $15 million to $18 million. And that's an aerial exhibit.
What you're looking at here in yellow is portions that have already been completed. League City Parkway and Pearland Parkway as they snake back towards Friendswood. The section in red is the section, the 1.87 miles that we're speaking of currently, and it's from 528 to 2351. The little yellow pieces you see that kind of hover around the little blue slice there, those are those are there because of developments that have sprung up out there. And that blue section is the portion that is under design by Galveston County currently.
Thank you, sir. Next on the list is the Whispering Pines Friendswood Link bridge elevation and widening. It's a current elevation of the bridge is below the base flood elevation, and it's narrow as well. Our goal is to elevate the bridge above the 100-year floodplain and also widen it to 4 lanes to carry on the east and west side of the roadway, of the bridge. It's to also improve the current designated evacuation route, being one of 3 designated routes for the City of Friendswood. And our goal is seeking hazard mitigation grant funds to help offset the cost. Its estimated cost at this time is $12 million to $15 million. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. James Toney.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is James Toney, Director of Parks and Rec. And as Renee mentioned earlier, we're going to just give you a snapshot of what you see here. Once you guys decide to get into your park subcommittees, staff will be made available to come and give you a little more detailed information and be available to answer any questions that you may have about the projects that you'll see on the screens coming forward. So what we're looking at here for the CIP beyond 5 years, we're going to talk about, and you'll see future slides involving Stevenson Park walking trails and restrooms, a downtown pavilion, Lake Friendswood additional parking, city pool rehabilitation, Old City Park additional parking, Corporal Wesley J. Canning Sports Park, which is known as Baker Rose Park, playground updates, and a sub-regional park at Lundy Lane. So the first side that you're looking at here is the Stevenson Park walking trail. What we would like to do is expand and rehab the existing trail. As you can see, it's a crushed granite type trail. We'd like to bring in a trail that's going to be all weather, that can be used all the time and not when the surface is dry. It would also allow for us to lessen our maintenance costs. And that estimated cost for this particular type of walking trail is about $250 to $278. The next one you see here is Stevenson Park restroom facilities. The existing facilities are aging and in need of constant repairs. There's one near the gazebo, and then the other one's backed by the Rotary Pavilion. These new restrooms will, like I said, replace the 2 aging ones that we have here, and possibly add a third one on location at the park. Estimated cost would be $600 to $700. The next one that you see here is a downtown pavilion. We're thinking that this is something that could be utilized on the old fire station lot, which is now used for overflow parking for City Hall and Stevenson Park. This doesn't take place of any existing pavilions or gazebos that you see here and currently at Stevenson Park, but it will address some of the recreation space that's called out in our Parks Master Plan. This could be a multi-use facility, not only for larger events, large-scale events, but it also can dub as additional parking when there's not an activity or event taking place. Estimated cost would be $2.3 to $2.55 million. The next slide is Lake Friendswood additional parking. Currently, the site has parking spaces for about 44. We just purchased some adjacent property next to it, roughly about 2 acres. This additional parking will allow us to not only expand the programming at that particular facility, but it will also make sure that we're not causing any traffic jams in the streets by having individuals parking along the roadways. Estimated cost would be $300 to $400K. City pool. So the existing pool was constructed in 1986, and it's a very old and outdated type structure. We're hoping that new restrooms and offices are currently being constructed. I don't know if anyone saw as you were parking here at Stevenson Park, we're in the process of adding new restroom building and also a new ticket office currently. Unfortunately, the pool has seen its last plaster. We've had, as you can see here, it says that we've had 3. We won't be able to do that again. So at this point, the next stage is to come in and develop and create a new pool. New pool deck, fencing, and associated plumbing. And that estimated cost is about $5 to $5.5 million. Old City Park is currently under construction. You guys have been over there to look that we're building a new pavilion, a new restroom, and then there's also facilities for a new dog park that's located just off of Marywood to the southeast of Old City Park. Currently, there's 44 parking spaces. The original plan called for 84 parking spaces, but unfortunately, we were unable to meet that. So we would love to be able to add those additional 44 spaces back into the plan. Estimated cost would be $350 to $388K. And this slide here is Corporal Wesley J. Cannon Sports Park, also known as Baker Road. Upgrades there. I don't know if everyone knows, but this facility is kind of a detention area owned by the Galveston County Drainage District. They're currently, when they did some reconstruction and regrading there, they put in space for about 7 soccer fields, so it's a possibility for us to expand this facility and include additional fields, lighting for those fields, a pavilion, a restroom facilities, and then fencing. This will help alleviate the increasing demands that you see for youth sports fields, pavilions, and playgrounds within the city, and it also is part of our Parks Master Plan that calls for additional field space for our youth. Estimated cost is $2.5 to $2.7 million. Playgrounds. This proposed is to meet the adding playgrounds into the park system. There's 3 different locations that I would like to either improve the existing playgrounds or add new playgrounds. Old City Park is one of those facilities. As we're doing the renovations to it down, there's a very old playground that needs to be replaced. Stevenson Park, additional playgrounds to include swings, which we do not have currently in the city of Friendswood. And then also Corporal Wesley J. Cannon Sports Park to include a new playground there. And again, this will help alleviate the increasing demands that you see for youth sports fields, pavilions, playgrounds within our city. And the estimated cost is $300 to $333. Sub-Regional Park, Lundy Lane. During the 2013 bond package, the city was able to acquire 24 acres of parkland just off of Lundy Lane and West Parkwood. We would love to be able to make the improvements there because we didn't have the funding to do that during the 2013 election, to be able to bring in a parking lot, pavilion, restroom facilities, possibly 7 fields, lighting and fencing. And again, this will also help alleviate the increasing demands that youth sports fields and pavilions, playgrounds within the city. Estimated cost 1.9, 2.2 million. All right, so I think Steve will take this part over. Thank you.
So, as we kind of come to the conclusion here, what other considerations are out there? And it's more of a question posed to you guys this evening. You've seen what staff has at hand, and it's based upon either recommendations from a previous bond back in 2013, through phone calls and emails from citizens over the past 6 or 7 years. And so that, along with facilities that were either damaged or in constant need of maintenance and repair. Some of the considerations that we had talked about was sidewalks like are going up on Greenbrier currently, hike and bike trails, and then I know drainage is probably on everybody's mind at some point, considering the events of the last, 18, almost 2 years now, I guess. There will be a presentation to City Council on Monday, April the 1st, by the Drainage Subcommittee, which has been hard at work for almost a year now. Every Wednesday night, they've met to come up with ways to help alleviate some of the drainage issues here. So I would invite everybody to attend council on Monday evening. And I do believe that we'll be lucky enough to have them come present to us, at least give us a summary of that report in the future. So do we want to?
Can you hear me? Obviously, the drainage will impact whatever this group comes up with, because issuing debt for one series of projects is the same as issuing debt for another, so we don't want one to compete with one another. Since the group has been meeting since last July, they're relatively close to making a recommendation to council. As Stephen mentioned, it'll be April 1st. After that April 1st council meeting, the group will come present to this group for y'all to take that into consideration when you're vetting overall debt issuances and how much money to potentially allocate in the form of a bond election. The question was what type of relationship or partnership the city has currently with the school district, because they do have facilities in the community that can serve dual purposes. We actually have one of the best relationships in the entire state of Texas with our school district. We currently have ongoing interlocal agreements to use their facilities for programs such as summer day camp, for exercise programs throughout the year. Every one of their parks are open to the public after school hours. Obviously, with school security concerns, those facilities are not open during the day when children are on site. We have dual purpose. For instance, next to the junior high, there's a detention pond that's also 2 football fields. Back in 2000, I want to say 8 or 9, when the junior high was built, they had a need for detention ponds, and we had a need for football fields, so we met in the middle and put fields at the bottom of a pond. So yes, sir. So that's a thought that could be definitely brought up. If you can convince them to issue the debt and us benefit from it, we're all for it. Yeah.